Our Ask Reddit by Reddit universe. People who have been the target of murders, assassins. How did you survive and why did they target you? They missed. That's about the only reason. It was a random act of violence. A man ran up behind me, put a gun to my head and shot. He flinched or I did and he missed by an inch. Blew out my left eardrum and burned my hair behind my ear. He ran off immediately after. Cops said it was probably a gang initiation thing. I have deafening tinnitus now and horrible anxiety in public. I'm not sure if it counts, but a few years ago in high school, there was this guy that used to trouble everyone by taking naked photos of them when they were changing after pay class. I happened to be one of his targets, so I reported him to my teacher and eventually he got suspended for about a month and had to attend counseling sessions. One day I was at the bus stop waiting for my bus when suddenly I felt a push on my back and I fell onto the road. Luckily for me, the bus driver stopped the bus in time and I survived. However, I fell directly on my arm and it was fractured. Last I heard, he went to the juvenile center and no one ever had to see this devil again. It's not my story, but the story of a family friend. He was a well-respected lawyer, and had a case against the mafia. The evidence was substantial, and he won the case. Multiple mafia members went to prison, and almost immediately after the case wrapped he started receiving threats. A few weeks later, despite police awareness, he was run off the road by another car. He survived, but with massive trauma, lost years of memory. He and his family moved states, and he is no longer able to work. It's a survival story, but not a win. I've posted about this before. I was in a really bad, abusive relationship. He had many mental issues along with diabetes. This doesn't excuse any of it, as he was aware of what his body was doing and he never got help. But it's important to know it didn't exactly come out of the blue. One night, he seemed bored and started trying to stick his feet in my face. I pushed them away, disgusted, and he exploded. It was a whole lot of action. He started by trying to choke me. I freed myself by grabbing a cat brush, the kind with the sharp metal points, and pushing it into his chest. He let me go but pushed me to the ground and lifted his airsoft rifle and drove it to my head like he was trying to cave in my skull. At the last moment he hesitated. I ran out of the apartment and called the cops. It didn't occur to me until later when I was with a public defender documenting my injuries that he had really wanted to kill me. I had bruising so deep they were black in color. In places I don't even remember him hitting me. He really would have, if something in him hadn't hesitated. Did you find out why he hesitated? And hopefully he's in prison forever. My dumbass decided he loved me and I couldn't do that to him. Probably the biggest mistake I ever made. I keep looking over my shoulder, waiting for him to figure out where I am and finish the job. I understand that sounds dramatic, and my rational brain knows there is next to no chance that will happen, but the fear is there. I'd like to think he hesitated because he felt something for me and decided he couldn't kill someone he loved, but realistically, I think he just realized he'd get himself into some major trouble he wouldn't have been able to get out of. Either way, I'm grateful to still be here. My ex-boyfriend hired some guy from Chicago to murder me after I broke up with him for selling drugs to my younger sister. Fortunately, my ex and I both had a mutual friend who found out and had more pull with the attempted assassin. Both were Polish immigrants. Ex calls me up later and demands 000 from me because he didn't get what he paid for, as the hired gun wouldn't give a refund. I was almost murdered. If it wasn't for my manager I would have been. My sister set me up on a date with her friend. I ended up having to work the weekend so I cancelled. The date went out with someone else and afterwards invited him to her apartment. Right before they went inside someone killed them both with a gun. It turned out to be a jealous neighbor of the girl who she was also messing with. That could have been me if she decided to let me in for tea. My dad's cousin in high school used to sell drugs. Started small and then starting growing to selling in different towns. A gang wasn't too pleased that he was selling on their turf so they put a hit on his head. The cops got wind of it before they killed him and picked him up from school. He ended up moving and I'm pretty sure he's in jail now. This girl who thought knew me messaged me on Instagram. Even though we never met we continued talking. Turns out she had a boyfriend who went to my school and he threatened to kill me if I didn't block her. He actually brought a knife to school that day too. Nothing happened to me, while the kid with a knife was expelled after a teacher saw the knife in his backpack. I had the exact same thing happen in my sister's school. A friend of my dad had a radio in the 80s. He had connections in the Spanish government and talked about all the shit that happened inside. They shot at him. He survived. They ran over him. He survived. In the end they paid him to keep quiet. He can't walk without help though. The car hit him pretty bad. I was on an almost school shooters list. Me and my friend tried to befriend a kid with pretty bad Asperger's. He was known to have horrible anger management issue, always got in a lot of trouble and was somewhat infamous, but we thought he deserved at least a couple friends. The plan was to just kinda sit with him at lunch and apart from that carry on with our lives as normal. But being he had very little social skills, never had friends and no boundaries, he didn't know how to handle it. Very sad. He would come up to us at bad times while I was at practice, talking to girls or teachers, and would message us online day and night. We tried to have a talk with him about boundaries and how friends give each other space etc, but this just made him feel rejected and infuriated him. He became more obsessed and more persistent. Around this time I got my first girlfriend and started hanging out with her at school, so my other friend was the one who had handled it more than I did. A few weeks later found the kid tried beat the shit out of my friend. He got stopped by other kids and the campus police officers. He was expelled and sent to a school for people with disabilities. I was honestly relieved he would be somewhere more equipped to help him. After that I kinda just forgot about it. About 3 months later I got called into the administration office and walked into a room with the dean of students and a police officer. I started panicking because in those days I smoked a lot of weed and thought I might have gotten caught. I was informed that the kid's mom found a list in his room of maybe 10 people that he wanted to shoot. We were number 1 and 2. His parents were divorced and I guess the dad had guns, so the mom panicked and called the police. The officer asked me if I was scared. I said no, I thought the kid was the kind to make empty threats out of anger and wouldn't go through with something like that, but my friend was terrified. I don't know what came of that from a legal standpoint. Last I heard the kid got help and figured it out and is going to college. He actually messages me happy birthday every year. I don't respond. This was when I lived in Cleveland. Oh, the kind of nice part, but really they are all just oases in a sea of drug and gang neighborhoods. No one thinks of Cleveland as the gang-filled city, but seriously, live there for 5 minutes. We didn't get in the news, but we had issues the whole time I've been alive, up until moving away finally a year ago. There had been a string of violent rapes of women out jogging in the mornings before sunup. That neighborhood was desperate to appear hip and millennial and had built up a bunch of wannabe cute shops and such all along one road, attracting the young who want to live in cool areas, artsy, etc. But none of them understood what they were really moving into, and as a result, they were all just ripe for the picking because they were oblivious and thought that it wasn't really the inner city if it had a Chipotle next to a dozen of cute buy my homemade sweaters yak butter organic produce shops in it. So this rapist had gotten 4 girls so far, snagged them off the sidewalk, beat them, raped them, and left them bleeding on the ground. I had a new dog at that time. I thought I needed one for protection, and it had been 2 years since my husky girl died. I ended up with a big red standard poodle, 6 years old, with a history of aggression and attitude problems. I love that guy. He's still with me. I do dog training, so managing a dog like that is nothing. And I figured that a dog with a hair trigger is probably good for a young lady living alone anyway. We lived in an apartment, and the only way for him to potty was for us to go on 10 walks a day. Basically, I never skimped on those walks. We would walk miles for at least 2 of them, and practice our behavior on the way. Well, this morning it was dark, 4:30 am, and I had only had my boy for about a week and a half. We were doing well. On our 3rd block or so of the walk, I didn't notice that a guy stepped out behind me, either from behind a hedge of one of the nice houses, or between this spa building and the next one. All I saw was his hand and the butt of his gun come up in my right periphery, I assume for a pistol whipping. My dog noticed though. He turned around, savage like I had not seen him before, and I've never seen him like that since either. I'm pretty sure that first snap got the guy straight in the dick. Good dog. He was holding his gun the wrong way around, by the barrel, luckily, so we didn't get shot right away, and my dog must have startled him so badly that he didn't even think to do anything except run. My dog chased him 3 blocks while I chased after them, because I was terrified I was about to lose my new dog. Eventually, my dog came dancing back to me. Think poodle prancing like a little frou-frou doggy dancer, because that is exactly what he did, like a frilly silly thing, so proud of himself, and I just hugged him. I guess that guy learned that just because a poodle looks like a silly pom-pom pillow prince doesn't mean he won't eat you for dinner. Unfortunately, as much as I would like to just joke it all off, losing us and being humiliated must have enraged him. He did get another girl that morning, in front of a house we could see from my apartment porch. It was the most violent attack he'd done so far. The woman almost didn't survive. He beat her so badly she ended up in a coma for a bit according to the news. Dragged her between 2 cars parked on the street, raped her there, dragged her into the bushes of the house, and left her for dead. That was his last attack, at least. The cops finally caught him before he could go again. I was a photojournalist in an unnamed Central American country doing humanitarian coverage for a college. Suddenly there were riots against the government and officials started shooting people with cameras. My group was chased so I had to change my appearance. That is clothes, hat, satchel, and ditch my camera to an in-country contact and acted like a normal student to smuggle my SD cards in little slots I cut in my shoes until I got to the US, where I took them out and just had them in my pocket so to not arouse suspicion by 10/10 would do again. My brother liked to brag about his money and usually invited his scummy friends to drinks, food, even rides everywhere they wanted to go. One day, they told my brother that the car of a friend of theirs had broken down and asked him for help. When they go to his location, a guy comes out of nowhere and shoots my brother 3 times in the back. Almost agonizing. They put him in his car and his friends and the shooter start driving who knows where, I would guess to end him and dispose the body. The capital in my country is really small, so to get anywhere you have to cross a monument that connects highways to go anyplace far away. To specify, my brother was in the back with one of his friends. The other friend was driving and the shooter was in the passenger seat. When they got to the monument, don't ask me how, not even my brother understands with 3 shoots in his body and bleeding to death. But he saw a small distraction from the guy next to him, and the nervousness of the guys in the front that were going through the most trafficked area possible. He hit the guy with his head, opened the door and rolled out of the car. He started crawling on the street to get to a sidewalk and started yelling for help. The guys in the car obviously escaped. Given the area, they didn't stop nor shot him cause it would have caused a huge scandal. In the end, ambulance got there. My brother survived because none of the bullets touched anything vital. Eventually, they caught the 3 guys, but a lot of the other friends that were involved were not charged due to lack of evidence. My father was involved, as competition to them, with the Russian mafia in Finland in the 90s. He sold weapons, did some protection services, loan sharking and other stuff. He ended up killing someone connected pretty high up to Russia and got a hit on his head. Being his only son, I was in danger as they couldn't get to my father. Me and my mother moved across the country under a different name. They ended up kidnapping my father's then wife, took her to woods and shot her. This was a pretty big deal since the Russian mafia had a strict rule not to usually do hits on women or children. I was on holiday with my daughter in London, and whilst I was walking down an alleyway I had a sniper shoot at me. The bullet snagged my arm slightly and I lost a lot of blood, but it was not life-threatening. After this shot I ran, puzzled as to why I was targeted. Several months later, after I left hospital, I found a note on my porch addressed to me. I read it and it explained that I had been mistaken for a rival assassin and they had attempted to take me out. To this day, I don't know who took the shot. While it seemed strange at the time, I actually didn't find out about the circumstances until 20 years later. I worked at the White House during the Clinton administration in an IT capacity, and was traveling on a trip to the Philippines and the APEC conference in Jakarta, Indonesia. We had flown into Manila late, and hopped on the bus to the hotel with the staff motorcade. Everyone was pretty awake, and we were all beasing on the ride to the hotel. About 45 minutes into the ride, I look out the window of the bus and we are on a narrow road lined by corrugated tin shacks. It really seemed strange at the time, since why would the road from the airport to the nice hotels in Manila have to go through this neighborhood? We eventually arrived at the hotel, and it was quickly forgotten 20 years later. I am watching a series on the History Channel about the United States Secret Service. This one episode was about how the Secret Service coordinates with intelligence agencies, and talked about on a Clinton trip to Manila where they overheard Al-Qaeda was talking about a wedding cake under the bridge. Wedding cake was a known code word for bomb. Clinton was diverted to the alternate route, and undoubtedly got to the hotel a lot quicker than we did. It turns out there was indeed a bomb under the bridge on the route to the hotel. I was obviously not the target, but it was crazy, and many of us could have been collateral damage. A friend of mine had a brother who did 2 tours in Afghanistan as a sniper. About 8 months after his second tour, while walking around town in Boston, someone called out his name. He turned, and right as he turned, a shot rang out and a bullet pierced his shoulder. As far as I know, they never caught the shooter and have no idea why he was targeted. They believe that the person calling his name saved his life, as his sudden movement probably avoided a kill shot. Just the luckiest timing possible. Never shot at once in 2 tours, but shot back home. Not exactly murderers, but I am pretty sure they have killed people before. But I have been kidnapped 3 times. Last time being 3 weeks ago. Lucky enough to still be alive. 3 weeks ago I was kidnapped at the beach, taken on our boat and was left adrift. Had to swim more than an hour to get to the closest quay. It was already dark around 7-8 p.m. I think you just do anything to survive. I don't really know why I have been targeted. I think it is just pretty bad luck and living in a dangerous country like Venezuela. Not sure if this counts, as I wasn't the intended target, but my dad ran a chapter of a fairly notorious biker gang, notorious enough to get their own episode of Gangland. Once my dad left, a guy who never really liked him all that much took his place and insisted that since he was no longer in the gang, he needed to get rid of his tattoo. My dad told him to go pound sand. Surprisingly, that didn't go over particularly well, and he ordered his SUV bombed. We lived in an apartment complex at the time and they blew up the wrong SUV. Thankfully no one was inside either. As far as I know, that was the only attempt on his life. At least as long as I was alive. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to Reddit Universe.